This FedGov Today program is sponsored by Cloudera. On this edition of FedGov Today with Francis Rose, information integration takes off across the IC. A generative AI jumpstart all over the federal government and a digital transformation at GSA. Their CIO, David Shive, is here. Welcome to FedGov Today with Francis Rose. The intelligence community is focused on integrating the information it has across all of the agencies within the IC. Leaders say that integration is more important than ever because the agencies have more data to integrate than ever. Dr. Stacey Dixon is Principal Deputy Director of National Intelligence. Stacey, welcome. Thanks for joining me today. What is the key and the current state of that information integration across all of the agencies in the IC?
Thanks, Francis. It's great to be here, first of all. I would say if you look at the way the ODNI, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, was created, the first 20 years was all about creating that foundation, creating some common structures for IT, creating those partnerships. Going forward, we really need to optimize how we share the information. So how do we work as a community to make data a strategic asset? How do we create the standards and the governance that's needed? How do we create the compute environment to allow us to use the emerging technology? And so we've got a number of strategies that we've delivered over the past couple of years that actually help enable that. And our chief information officers, our chief data officers, and our chief AI officers are all working together to try to move forward both the network we need, the data we need, where we need it, as well as the compute we need behind it to actually get the work done.
A number of those officials that you just talked about have been on this program over the last year or so and talking about that integration within their own agencies. What does that look like from the ODNI level about how one organization is talking to another organization, not just to share the data, but to share the best practices and share the techniques that they're using within their own organizations and to try to bridge those gaps across the agencies?
I've been really excited because I get sometimes brought into these conversations, and all of them have councils where they talk amongst all of the different 18 elements of our community so they can share those best practices and potentially leverage off of others' contracts or others' approaches to certain things. The thing that I love is that they also then have their councils meet together, and you'll get the CIOs, the CDOs, and the AI officers actually talking about issues and talking through them and doing some of their long-term planning and strategy. They look to us as the sort of executives and the leaders of the organizations to buy into their visions, buy into their plans, and try to get them the resources they need. And so we've sort of been, I would say it's a partnership along the way, both of them sharing information, but also with us who are certainly trying to decide where to put our investments within the community.
You mentioned artificial intelligence, and that's a buzzword right now as much as it is a technology. How do you go about analyzing a technology like that to make sure it's fitting use cases instead of just doing something cool that is kind of on the edge?
Our resources are not unlimited in the government, and so we have to definitely focus on where is the greatest bang for the buck, where can we actually apply those smart brains who understand how to code or how to develop the architectures to enable us to do this. And those individuals generally are working with the mission partners to figure out where can we apply the tools to help advance the mission the most quickly and with the most impact. And so they'll come back with great pitches, basically, to say, if you give us a little bit more money, we'll be able to do this thing, or we'll be able to buy this particular type of this compute to support the data, I see. So a lot of them are they're trying to figure out what are the best places to apply it, not only in the summarization of all of the really large data sets that we have, but how do you sort of take it the next step and figure out what sort of insights you can derive and even an analysis that you can do. Can it find trends to help the people out so that the people aren't sort of being inundated by all the data themselves?
Is that maybe the biggest gain technologically that you've made in the IC, is the ability to automate so much of the analysis that humans used to have to do?
I would say yes. It's automating it so that it can some of it can run on its own, and sometimes be able to see that something happens in the world or sense that something happens in the world and then take an action, like go collect some other information somewhere else. But also being able to augment the analysts. They have so much on their plates and so many things happening in the world means that they've got to keep track of a lot of different places at the same time. How do we enable the technology to help them by alerting them when something is happening over here where they may be focused there? So it's it's been both a usage of how can you automate more things, as well as how do you augment the really smart people that we have doing the work.
You hit the word I was going to go to next, and that's analysts. How does this impact the way that analysts do their jobs, and how does it impact the way that you consider building the workforce, strategize building the workforce for 2030 and 2035 and beyond?
What we're trying to do is to take some of the more mundane and routine things off the analyst's plates, so they can focus on those things that really require, the human brain, the real critical thinking to figure out what's happening in the world. And that's really what we're trying to go with that one. So it's a matter of figuring out what their comfort level is of using these tools, because a lot of people, when they're originally trained and they've been doing this for many, many years, the tools are new. The tools are essentially black boxes at times, where you put something in and something comes out, and we have to increase their confidence and trust that it's actually going to be something that's useful for them. It requires people that are more comfortable around their colleagues who are sort of data scientists or who are coders and algorithm developers. How do you make sure that they can work together and the analysts see the benefits of these tools applied to their mission?
And what I was going to say was, it strikes me that is as important as the technology itself, the soft skills from the top down, and at the horizontal level too, to help folks understand why this is happening, how this is going to help them do their jobs better. And I imagine in the case of AI and some of the buzz that goes around it, this is why this is not coming to take your place. This is giving you an extra tool in your toolbox. Is that a fair read on my part?
That's absolutely a fair read on it. I think that we're going to continue to need the critical thinking that people can do. We're going to continue to need someone that can really look at all the things that are happening and be able to make those connections that could be very difficult. And the machines, the tools can actually help them do this, but at the end of the day, it will be a very long time before any analyst is moved out of the loop. People still want to engage with people and have people tell them what's happening and kind of painting that picture for them.
Is the type of person that you're looking for, the type of person that you're hiring, or the type of person that you're trying to retain changing as in the analyst community as a result of the tools that are available to them now?
There are some new areas that we're having to focus on that, frankly, we're getting a lot more questions from policymakers. If you look at economic security, and so the relationship of, say, sanctions to the actions taking place in the world. If you look at emerging technologies, and we sort of all lived through this pandemic. If you look at biosecurity as a thing, there are skill sets that, while we had some in the community, we're being asked a lot more questions about these things, and so we're needing to go and find and either hire people or just have access to them where they are. So how do we increase our partnerships with academia and industry and think tanks where some of these experts are, as well as trying to hire them into our community?
One of the folks that I talked about earlier who joined me recently was Lakshmi Raman of the CIA, and she talked about the importance of the public-private partnerships that they're developing with exactly those types of organizations. What do they add to the data collection, the data integration, or just the overall learning process to the IC community?
It's interesting. There are people out there that are essentially thinking about the same thing we're thinking about, but in a different way and for different reasons. Their insight can help add nuance and other perspectives to the analysis that we do, and so it actually enriches the analysis that we can provide for policymakers. It gives us insights that are slightly different than the kinds that we would be coming up with on our own, because they may be going out and trying to figure out, for example, you have a venture capitalist out there who's trying to figure out if this business is one that he or she wants to invest in. That perspective will be really interesting, as we may be looking at similar technologies for different reasons. Like, what is the world doing with them? Can we bring that knowledge and just be able to ask these folks some questions based on interactions they've had? And you can think about that in terms of all sorts of different areas in the world, all sorts of different companies have insights that would be really useful for analysts to know.
We have less than a minute left, Stacey. It sounds like a lot of the things that you're doing, a lot of the techniques in thinking about things from a venture capital perspective and those kinds of things are similar to what's happening in the Defense Department. Is there a dialogue about how are you doing this versus how are you doing this, so that you can learn from each other there?
Absolutely. That's one of the other things that's so great. The various councils that we have are meeting with the councils that the DoD has, and our Chief Information Officer and their Chief Information Officer regularly meet. And so that kind of partnership and being able to leverage each other's capabilities is a huge part of what they do.
Dr. Stacey Dixon, it's great to have you on the program. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Francis. It's great to be here.
You can read more about data in the intelligence community on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Up next, a generative AI jumpstart all over the federal government. FedGov Today with Francis Rose continues in a moment. Here's Jonathan Album of ServiceNow on innovation in government from TechNet Cyber, presented by Carasoft.
Strong defense can be, your best offense. And so often that's about running a really secure infrastructure in the first place, having a strong approach to IT operations management, and using these tools to help us understand what our environments really look like. We can train AIs to help us understand when we're deviating from normal. There's so much activity on these networks, and if we are required as practitioners to investigate every single thing that looks anomalous, we spend a lot of time chasing down maybe a false positive. So when the AI knows what normal looks like and can be very accurate in saying, this isn't normal, there's something going on, we can train our limited resources right where it needs to be. And when we continue to train these AIs to understand what good cyber defense looks like, we can go from prevention into detection, like I said. But now, how do we respond when these incidents are happening?
For more, go to innovationingov.com. Welcome back. The General Services Administration has more than 150 generative AI pilots in progress. The administrator of GSA, Robin Carnahan, says generative AI tools are going to be, quote, a giant help for GSA to provide shared services across government. Rob Carey is president of Cloudera Government Solutions. He's former Principal Deputy Chief Information Officer at DoD and former CIO of the Navy. Rob, welcome. It's great to see you again. What should agencies be thinking about now as they're looking at integrating AI solutions, whether it's a pilot program or something that they've decided to move out on, into their regular workflows, into their regular ways of doing business?
Thanks for having me, Francis. So what agencies, in my mind, should think about is, A, where's the data? This is a data problem. AI doesn't provide any value unless you can harness the data, locate it, move it, and then get it ready for analytics. And then the next thing is, do you know what problem you're trying to solve? It sounds simple, but at the same time, knowing the problem you want to solve, the connected data, bringing it in, running the analytics, that's the name of the game. There is an order to the madness here. The government is in fact doing many pilots. That's good, because you're learning how you do this.
What should one learn from the pilot that one is running then?
Well, you're going to learn the magnitude, the flow. You're going to perfect the model. That's the point, is the model gives you a repeatable answer, meets your expectations, and now you know how to create the language learning models, the vector databases, the infrastructure necessary to move AI forward.
So when you talk about where the data is, are you talking about where it is from an infrastructure perspective? Are we in the cloud? Do we have a hybrid cloud infrastructure? That kind of thing? Or are you talking about some other kind of where the data is?
No, that's exactly. Where is the data located? Can I move it into the data lakehouse, a central place where I can run my analytics on it? That's important. If you don't know where it is, and if it is in several different places, several different types of architectures, right, then you want to get it into a central place or be able to access it from a central location and then do your analytics.
So regarding then the security that has to be around that, are people still asking you the same questions about FedRAMP certification and those kinds of things that they were 3 years ago, 5 years ago, or has that dialogue changed, do you think?
It is enabling the security wrapper around the public cloud data. That's where FedRAMP and hybrid intersect, right? The data will not likely be in the public cloud completely. It will likely not be on-prem completely. So FedRAMP still plays because part of the data is in fact connected in that manner. So once you understand that, now the security envelope of inside the firewall of that agency and the FedRAMP-enabled public cloud have to mesh so that from a single pane of glass, you can come in and control that data.
All right, a chief data officer told me recently 3 C's that are important to her job: collection, collation, and curation of the data. Which of those is either the most important, or which of those do you think people get wrong most of the time when they're trying to think about these things?
I think they're all important. They are the first 3 steps of any data lifecycle. The last 2 steps are, put it in a serving mode and serve it up, and then run the analytics on it. So at the end of the day, those first 3 have to be done properly and correctly. Otherwise, you don't get to do the back half, which is high-end analytic. It could be machine learning. It could be AI.
Is there an infrastructure solution, equation, whatever, that you've seen that works best for agencies to do all of these things?
Not really, because in my opinion, we're still experimenting. There are some production AI systems blossoming across government, but at the same time, there's a lot of experimentation going on across the government to get that, exactly what you just said, get that right. Dial that in, now we'll replicate.
What should people be looking at then as they're doing that experimentation? What results should they be analyzing and paying the most attention to?
Those that are repeatable and answering the mission question that has been asked, right? So that's what you got to understand. We're not doing AI for AI's sake. We're doing AI to further the mission, whether it is making some system more effective, right? It's better at what it does, or making it more efficient, saving the taxpayers money.
Is that pretty much then the measure for success? That's usually what I ask to wrap up a segment like this, is how does one know that one is succeeding? Is doing those things pretty much it, or are there other markers to pay attention to?
They're the main markers. As a former CIO, I cared about two things. You're solving my problem operationally, so that's effectiveness, or you're saving me money, that's efficiency. If you're doing both, I'm a happy guy.
Rob, it's great to see you again.
Great to see you again, Francis. Thank you.
You can read more about generative AI in government on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Up next, a digital transformation at GSA. Their CIO, David Shive, is here when FedGov Today with Francis Rose continues in a moment. Here's Matt Topper of Uber Ether on innovation in government from TechNet Cyber, presented by Carasoft.
The zero trust moniker is really wrong, right? It should really be defined trust. And what I've seen over the last few years is that resiliency of multi-provider standards-based has actually been falling apart as we've moved towards zero trust. And there's a lot of, well, if we go buy this vendor solution, it'll solve it all. And the problem is, that's great until you meet in the field and that other group you're meeting with has a different vendor solution. They're like, well, if you just download their client and our client, or copy all of your data to our data, it'll work fine. And that's not how trust ever even works in the real world.
For more, go to innovationingov.com. Welcome back. The General Services Administration's in the midst of a digital transformation. That transformation involves IT, but not just IT. David Shive is the Chief Information Officer at GSA. Dave, welcome. It's great to see you again. What are the important components of the digital transformation that you're leading at GSA?
Thanks for the question, Francis. We've identified three overarching strategic goals when we take a look at our digital transformation. We're pretty far into it, almost a decade now. We separated out into digital experience. You know, we all lead digital lives in our personal lives, and increasingly government is operating the same way, making sure that people have the right digital tools to do the work of government and to provide downstream service to the citizens that we all serve. The second is customer experience. It's hard to do good work if the experiences that people have using your tools, your technology, your processes are not well designed and functional. So we have a big strategic focus there. And then the third, because we also serve our employees, the employees of GSA, is employee experience, making sure that as they go about the work of their day, that they're focused on that work rather than the underlying technology. We call it transparent technology at GSA. If our employees are focused on their technology, they're not focused on their work. And we have, that's broken into 6 different subjects, what we call strategic objectives. We look to increase the velocity in which the work of government happens through the use of digital technology. That should make sense. We try to make sure that everything that we do is cyber secure, that cybersecurity is baked in from the very beginning of every digital thing that we do. We try to simplify process. Technology is not always about blinking lights and spinning drives. Sometimes it's taking a look at a business process, re-engineering it so that it operates more effectively on the underlying technology. And then we have to adapt or die. We try to evolve our business processes so that they match up with 21st century business ideals here in government. Then the last two are we're living in a data-driven environment in today's day and age, so we try to maximize data as a strategic asset across the agency. And then the last is we can't get done the work of government without good people. So we try to create an inclusive, culturally relevant work environment so people can be their best selves and do their best work for this government.
One area where GSA has kind of been on the edge technologically is with automation. You were in on RPA at the very beginning of that and so on. How does automation and automation tools play into the work that you're doing on Digital Transformation Day?
Yeah, so that's a great question. The automative tools and augmentative tools are actually key to every digital transformation that we do. We don't go in with the tool-first mindset. We go in with taking a look at a business process and saying, what do we need to do to change this? And there's any number of tools in the toolbox. Sometimes that's automating the process. Sometimes that is training our workforce. Sometimes that's simplifying the process. And here in the 21st century, sometimes that's throwing a process away that no longer is relevant for what we're trying to accomplish.
And that's where I wanted to go next, because one of the challenges at the beginning of this, when people started to think about the change from IT modernization to digital transformation, it was tempting, I think, for a lot of agencies to just digitize whatever the workflow was that they had now. And I wonder how you tried to stay out of that and or continue to try to stay out of that mindset moving forward.
Yeah, so I love the question, Francis. When GSA started our modernization play, we basically took analog things, a piece of paper, and created digital versions of it. That got us going. That was a good first step. But our digital transformation now is reimagining the business of government from end to end so that we can put a digital overlay on top of that. But you generate values beyond just turning it into a digital thing. Once you have this digital overlay, you're able to actually see data moving through its life cycle and actually impact it before the end result to generate and iterate to better outcomes.
One of the things that you're getting there that I think is important is the idea that the point of all of this is the movement of data so that the employees can perform a service. And you've gotten out of the idea of IT because IT sounds like a great idea. It is a great idea, but that's not the point, it sounds like, is what you're getting at.
Yeah.
Is that a fair read on my part?
Yeah, that's a fair read. Our two primary goals are doing a transaction, whatever that transaction is, a rent billing thing or some acquisition, doing the transaction in the most efficient, effective way, and also creating data points along its life cycle so that we can know things and change that over time.
You talked about customer experience and employee experience, and it's interesting to me, some organizations shape that as one, and you have internal and external customers. You've chosen to frame that in a different way. Does that inform in some way the way that you think about each of those things, or is it just happen to be the language instrument that you chose to express those ideas?
So I've been at GSA for a while, and one of the reasons I've been here for as long as I have is we at GSA, we use ourselves as a proving ground for the art of the possible. And our employees are part of that proving ground. And so our customers, our partners are the agencies we serve and downstream to the citizens that we serve. We don't do to our agency partners what we haven't tried out on ourselves first. So, and our employees come alongside us and play in that role with us. So we're all the proving ground for doing good things in government.
As you work through that, how do you take the feedback then that the GSA team gives you, and I'm sure they give it to you,
they do,
about the tools that they have to use and the ways that they have to use them, and then incorporate that into what you then give back to them in order to improve that experience, to transform that experience?
Yeah, people are not shy about talking about IT.
I'm sure.
And so we do normal things. We do things like do surveys, monthly, quarterly, annually. Those have decreasing value here because the rapid pace of technology and business here in the 21st century is just so fast. Increasingly, we do transactional surveys, which are very familiar to people in their personal lives. They do that. They order something, and at the end, hey, how did we do? We are operating at that level of granularity, but then we also expand it out to more organic conversations because we found that there's data and information between the seams of surveys. And when you bring people together in an AMA, an Ask Me Anything session or something like that, you have access to information that you just don't get from a paper, a digital-based transaction. We take all of that and feed that into the machine.
Security obviously underpins everything that you're doing. What's your security approach, and how are you executing that security approach, Dave?
Well, so I can only go so far in a public forum like this. Our security approach has a couple of key components that we talk about publicly. One is we started implementing our zero trust architectures, not technology, zero trust architectures, about 4 or 5 years ago. And that assumes that nothing is trusted. And at GSA, we have a pretty big business enterprise, but we also have like non-tech business as well. We're the biggest property manager in the world. Our buildings have sensors all throughout that. Those are vectors for bad actors to exploit. We assume that even that stuff is untrusted, and verify and vet every single person, device, data, and piece of technology before it does a thing on behalf of GSA or in the GSA computing enterprise. That's key, but another key that's sometimes lost in the cybersecurity discussion is we interact with our people all the time. People do really great, smart things, and people make mistakes sometimes. And so we make sure that we're informing them with the latest information on what the right moves to do and what the wrong moves to do are to create a hyper cyber secure environment at GSA.
We have about 30 seconds left. You said zero trust architecture, not tools. What's the difference?
So there are any number of tools. Most of them do some really great things. Our adversaries, they work in the seams of tools and the seams of process. And so what we do instead is we make sure that everything that we employ, every tool, every training of people, every process, that is implemented in a fully integrated way so that we know what the impact is of one device or one tool and the other, and how they're going to operate or interoperate together.
Dave, you gave one of the most humble and inspiring speeches when you accepted the 2024 Eagle Award a couple of weeks back at the Fed 100. It's wonderful to have you on the program. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Francis.
You can read more about GSA's digital transformation on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. FedGov Today continues in a moment. Here's Steve Jasna of Carasoft on innovation in government from TechNet Cyber, presented by Carasoft.
I also see the evolution sort of ransomware and malware that's sort of being sort of jump-started by AI, right? And you know, these AI attacks are becoming harder to sort of manage, especially around phishing. Some of these things look very, very real. So I think, you know, AI, I think is going to be a theme sort of across all the verticals, you know, within cybersecurity.
For more, go to innovationingov.com. Welcome back in today's event spotlight. I hope you'll join me at Nats Park Thursday, October 3rd, to learn about the intersection of the cloud, data, and AI. Cloudera presents Accelerate AI with trusted data from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. that day. You'll learn how to maximize a hybrid cloud environment for AI and data success. You can read more about the event and register at fedgovtoday.com/events. FedGov Today TV returns next Sunday morning at 10:30 with John Tenaglia, the Principal Director of Defense Pricing and Contracting at DoD, and Jeff Kosis, the Senior Procurement Executive at GSA. I'm Francis Rose. I'll see you then. Thanks very much for watching. Have a great week.